All right, here we are at another Thursday. What's up, everyone? Thanks so much for joining my office hours again. I got some really good questions here today. We're going to talk about co-founder recruitment, how you go about the process of finding and auditioning a co-founder, how you get them into your mix in a way that is as safe as possible. And we're going to talk a little bit, just a little bit, about challenging assumptions in an online business, plus a few other things and whatever questions you drop in the chat. My name is JDM, aka Josh David Miller, and this is the Startup Traction Hotline, which is my weekly Q&A AMA session where you guys get to ask me anything that you want. Down in the link is a description should you want to throw a question my way. This is what you can hit up. You can write a question. You can record a question, including with video. If you do a video question, I'll play it right here on the air. But let's dive in. So the first thing I want to do is ask you kind of the question of the week. And the question of the week is, what are the biggest signals that you are looking for? And just to qualify this a little bit, these are signals from customers or from the market more broadly that you are on the right track. And as a brief aside, yesterday's edition of the Startup Meditations podcast that I do, which is a daily podcast, each episode's less than 5 minutes long. It's a small snippet of startup wisdom for you to ponder. That's what I got over here on the monitor, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But anyway, the episode was about how in the early stages of a startup, the product doesn't matter as much as you think it does. In fact, it doesn't matter very much at all, and it's just a tool that we use to get signals back from customers to find out whether or not we're on the right track. And so the signals that you're looking for are the most important part of the startup journey. It's how you get clarity. It's how you get focus. It's how you get data back. So what are the signals you're looking for? Are you looking for resonance with your problem statement, with your value proposition? Are you looking for actual acquisitions? Are you looking for, is there a revenue signal that you're looking for? Is it a retention signal that you're looking for? Or is it just, can you find the customers out there? What are the biggest signals that you're looking for right now? Drop it in the chat. Let me know what those are. And now for our first question here. So this is a question from another one of my YouTube videos from Hungry Alien Worms. I've been looking forward to saying that here. So I was asking about how you find a co-founder. So I kind of broke their question up into two parts. So I'm going to take them sort of separately here. So in the first part is like literally, how do you find a co-founder? How do you go with the process of finding it? And interestingly enough, this used to be a question that I was asked all the time. This used to be such a crazy frequent question. Like every single week I'd have founders asking me, how do I find a technical co-founder? How do I, and if they already are a technical founder, how do I find like a salesperson, sales co-founder to come along with me? And I think since the pandemic, it's kind of dropped a little bit, and I'm not really sure why. So this question's a throwback for me. So thanks for that, hungry alien worms. But how do you find them? So it's a good question. Now it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a sort of technical co-founder to help out with, like in the CTO, type role in the early stages, you're going to look in a slightly different place maybe than if you're looking for that traditional CEO, COO, sales and operations type person. But let's lay some groundwork here, because we had a little dialogue to make sure I understood the question here. And so that we're not talking about finding early hires. We're talking about co-founders for equity, or at least predominantly for equity. So we're looking at something a little bit different than somebody who is a hired gun for something like this. We're not looking for mercenaries. And that's the first thing to point out, because if you start going for, I'm looking to hire somebody, and you do the little like, I'm hiring banner on LinkedIn and so forth, you're going to get a certain kind of person that by and large is not the kind of person that you're looking for. Because for it to be a co-founder in a startup, it's very risky. So they have to have a lot of risk tolerance. They have to be a bit entrepreneurial. There's a lot of that has to enter into the picture that somebody just looking for an ad for a job probably isn't going to see. So I would ignore most of that probably. The best place to get any co-founder is going to be from your network or from your extended network. So if there are people that or people that that somebody else knows, that kind of thing, to do that. So reach out to everybody that's in your network, even people that not very well. You can put out messages and asks on LinkedIn, for example. It's a great place if you're working in a technical startup to try to find, people, where are these people? Do you know anybody who looks like this? And the more specific you can get, the more likely you are to get a positive response. Another thing you can do is to go to startup events. So those tend to attract the kind of people that I'm talking about, who are more risk tolerant, more entrepreneurial, and a little less traditional employee. And there are lots of those kinds of events you can go to. There's like pitch competitions, there's the startup weekends and things like that. Those are always a great way to meet people. Any of the networking events that are inside your ecosystem work really well for that. There's speed mentoring and that kind of thing that you can do as well. If you have a if you're in the United States, you might have a local or nearby local chapter of 1 Million Cups. That can be a great way to meet people as well. So it's just going to be it's going to be a lot of the hustle and just, meeting all the people that you'd encounter in all the normal ways. And I know that sounds pretty lame. That I'm not saying like, okay, here's how you can go about finding a co-founder. And that's because this process is actually really freaking hard. It's not something that I would expect to be easy. It's something that is in fact quite difficult to do because you're looking for kind of a special person. And I'm going to answer that in the second part of the question. I'm going to come back to that. But so there isn't like a magic bullet. There isn't a silver thing. There isn't a website you can go to where you're just going to crush it. And there are lots of places online where you can go and like find people who are looking to work with startups. And that's all kinds of like little founder dating sites. I've never found any that I really, really loved or that I've really seen great results from. If you've seen one out there, definitely drop that into the comments. I really do want to know, because again, this is like a really common struggle that founders have in the early stage when they're trying to find those co-founders. But I've never really found anything that. So it's just the grind, it's just the network, it's just showing up, and it's just meeting people and doing all of those extraordinarily uncomfortable things, along the way. So that's the first part. That's how you go about the process of finding them. The second question related to this, is basically, you didn't use this phrase. So this is not the phrase that Hungry Alien Worms used. I added the word audition in here, but it's basically, the question was, building the team is the main concern, and I want to work with them, informally initially to see if they're a good fit for the job, then offer equity and then do vesting. So you're thinking about the right things for that. But I'm just going to call this broadly like auditioning. And the audition works in a few stages. So first, once you find somebody out there's like, well, this person might have the skills, this might be interesting. The first audition is like, do I like this person at all? Is this somebody that I could even conceivably like spend a little bit of time with? If you like them, that's great. If you don't like them, this is never going to work. So that's like audition number one. And then audition number two is before you enter into a formal relationship, before you're really working on your startup together. You want to find that way of informally working together in order to see if you guys are a good fit for that kind of thing. We'll come back to that in just a second. And then the third audition is once you actually do bring them on, then you have that vesting period where in the real world with real stakes, where you're working on your real startup with real product, does this work out well? And so let's just take each of these in turn. So the first one, do you like working with them? That's the fairly self-explanatory one. This is just your gut check. Has to be somebody that you can see yourself spending a lot of time with and so forth. And that leads right into the second one. So you want to find a way to work together, to actually work together where there are stakes, that it can be low stakes, but there needs to be pressure involved so that you can see how well you guys just actually fit together. A lot of people think of finding a co-founder as something like hiring or maybe bringing in a mercenary, whereas it's actually much closer to marriage. So this is somebody that you're going to be spending a lot of time with, potentially 12, 15, 18-hour days with sometimes for an extended period of your life, for a couple of years. And so this is really going to need to be somebody that you're totally okay and comfortable and cool working with. If not, it's just never going to work. So you want to find that way to work together in some capacity like that. I think if you can do one of those competitions or one of those informal pre-accelerators or something like that, those would be great. Startup Weekend, which is a Techstars program, they're happening, in hundreds of cities in the world every single year. If you can go to one of those, basically you guys can go on a team together, pitch a brand new idea, because that's sort of the structure of Startup Weekend. You show up, but you guys are going to work together for the weekend and just see if you can work together under pressure. That's like the lowest stakes possible way of like, does this even work? Can we gel together? You can try to work on some community effort together. So you can organize something out in the real world and see how you guys work and collaborate well together on that. Or if you guys are on the technical side, maybe an open source project or something, but find one of those ways of actually working together for a period of time to see if it works. And then once you're getting all the good signals from there, then it makes sense to collaborate and work together in the real world. And that's where the stakes do get higher, right? Everybody thinks about Winklevoss, but it's usually not that severe. So Once you get to that stage, this is where you mostly just worry about protecting yourself and your company legally, and that's where you do have a vesting agreement. For those of you who aren't inducted into the language of vesting, this is where you say, okay, we're going to give you, I'm going to give you 20% of the company for, for this role, but you don't just give it to them right away, because once they have the equity, then getting it back is a thing, right? And so if you guys work together for 3 days and it doesn't work out and he runs away and he gets 20% of your company now, and that's just bullshit, right? So you don't want to do that. So vesting is how you actually divvy up that equity over time. So it's basically a combination of a few things. So one is usually like some type of cliff. So you have to last for a year before you get any equity, and then the rest of the equity vests over the following 2 years, something like that. So that that you're front loading like that assumption of risk, so that when you bring on that co-founder, you're saying like, okay, well, for the first year, like this might not work out, and so therefore, no equity in the company. Then you pivot into, okay, well, now this is working out well, so let's slowly give you the equity over time. So you can do that. So that's like those are two of the components. The third component is the actual mechanism by which you part ways. So that needs to be explicit into the agreement. And remember, it's not just about you, it's about them too, because your co-founder is also taking a really big risk to go with you on this journey. And so it needs to be a fair way to them. If you're looking for some way to unilaterally discharge a person within that first year, then that's honestly just not fair. So you need to put more thought into how that arrangement works. And the details of that are going to depend on your roles, how much equity we're talking about here, and so forth. The last question is kind of how much equity do you give? And this is it's a complicated question, and there's a lot of factors. I actually recommend doing a gut check with a tool. So I think Founders Pie is a good one to check out. If you hit me up in the comments, I can send you a spreadsheet template that I have that I've used for this kind of thing before. But the basic premise here is that you kind of take a lot of the emotion out of it for the initial part. The emotion will absolutely come back in, but take the emotion out of it for the early stages. And so you say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to agree on the things that are most important to our company's success. It's going to be, is it going to be product? Is it going to be market knowledge and distribution? Is it going to be ability to make sales? Like, what are the things that are going to be most critical to the success of our endeavor? So you agree on those things, and then you agree, and then you independently sort of evaluate each other in terms of how much are they able to contribute to each of those buckets. So once you do that, you can get math to spit you out numbers that aren't necessarily the final numbers you have to do. That's not the point. The point was to get to a number that you could talk about without any individual person having to say, I think you should only get 10%, because that's just not a very productive conversation. And this gives you something to ground the conversation in, to say we agreed that this skill was really important to our success, and we also agree that co-founder 3 doesn't really have that, and so that necessitates a lower level of equity for them, and that becomes a basis for that conversation. But the conversation is going to be hard, it is going to be challenging, it is going to be difficult, and if you're lucky, it's the first of many difficult conversations between you and your co-founders. So that's that. That's all I'll say about equity there. If you want to talk more about that, again, drop a comment, and I will get you a template that you can use for that. Outside of that, let me know if this is something that we should dive into in office hours in the future. So, shameless plug. I do have, before we get on to our next question, which is about challenging assumptions, it's one of my favorite subjects. I do have this podcast I'm running. It's a daily podcast. It's kind of an experiment for me. So it's a daily snippet of startup wisdom for you to ponder, and a question to help you focus in your journey to find traction. I release it every single day. It's less than 5 minutes long, and it's on some topic that just gives you something to think about. So it's an experiment of mine. We're up to, I think, 18 episodes is today, if I'm not mistaken there. So that's a kind of a little milestone for me. Today we're going to be talking about the formula for value proposition. So that'll drop somewhere around noon local time. So when you're watching this, that probably already existed and we're well past 18. But so if you check out startupmeditations.com and yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you find it helpful, and also let me know if there are any subjects that you want to talk about there. But enough about that. Let's get on to more questions. So next one we got here is, How do you go about challenging assumptions in an online business? So I released a video before about the IKEA effect. This was actually part of that Startup Meditations podcast that I have here. It's actually part of that, and so this was a question that actually came from that, which is why I decided to highlight it. So the question was about the IKEA effect, and so in the IKEA effect, basically the premise is that we tend to value more things that we create ourselves or ideas that we come up with ourselves, as opposed to ones that are pre-assembled or come from outside the building. So think about like we value the bookshelf that you buy and build from IKEA simply because you had to assemble it. Whereas if the guy from West Elm just drops it off in your living room, we value it maybe a little bit less, even though there's a monetary difference between those two things. You could check out that episode if you're curious to know more about that. That was, I think, uh, doesn't matter. It was episode number 9. So if you want to go back to the IKEA effect number 9, Startup Meditations, for more detail on that. But so I basically led that to a question of like, so then the important thing to think about is like, if we're like basically smelling our own farts, to be crass about it, and we have this predisposition to like what comes internally to us as opposed to what's coming out the building, that's dangerous for the very concept of design thinking. And so my question to help focus was like, what are, how do you go about the process of saying like, okay, what are the assumptions that I'm making right now, and how do I know if these are the right ones to make or the wrong ones to make? And so AJ asked this question about how do I challenge those assumptions in like the context of online business. So let's talk about it for a second. So basic premise here is that the way to get around that conflict, the way to get around that problem is the problem of this IKEA effect when it comes to your internal ideas, is to actually say, all right, well, data is what I need at the end of the day. So I got to come up with a question that I can ask. Then I got to go ask the question, which means of the market, which means of customers. And then I get that data back, and then I revise my priors, and I come up with a new question, and I do it again. And that's the startup life cycle. We call that build, measure, learn, right? Build is either the question or the tool we use to ask the question. And then we ask the question, and that's when we measure something and we get that data back and we incorporate that. That's the learning process. So startup, build, measure, learn. And so that's like the constant cycle that we're going through. And there are lots of different ways to approach exactly how you go about that cycle. But there's 2 pieces to it. So this cycle that is mentioned, this like build, measure, learn, this like ask a question and get data back. There's like a premise, an assumption built into that is oftentimes unexplored, which is, how do you know what the hell question to ask? And so that's like the important part. If you know what question to ask, answering the question and getting data back is actually pretty easy. It's usually easy, even if it's not just, let me start that over again. It's usually easy. If not, it's at least easier. It's not the hard part. The hard part is saying like, how do I know what question to ask in the first place? What question do I ask the market? What question do I ask my customers? And so the best way to do that is to think about challenging assumptions. So a lot of backstory to get to that. I apologize. That took a little bit longer than I expected to, but hopefully you're still with me here. The biggest assumption you make, the riskiest assumption, the one that you want to challenge, is the one that is of all the pool of assumptions you have, is the one that has the greatest impact on your success right now, and the one that is for which you have the least data. So it's really consequential. It's important to be right about it, or at least to know if you're wrong. And we don't have a lot of data about it. That's the assumptions you want to challenge. And so there's a process that you can go through called assumptions mapping. I think it's in Testing Business Ideas, which is one of the Strategizer books by David Bland and Alex Osterwalder, if you want to read a little bit about there. But the basic idea is you go through all of the things that you think you know about your. But hope, yeah, I don't all the things that we're assuming about our business model, about our value proposition, about our customers, about our market, about where we're going to find them, about how we're creating value, how we're delivering that value, and so forth. We're going to get all that stuff, all of it. And then we want to start plotting those on that graph, on the graph of how much data do I have and how important is it to be right about it. And if you think about that little graph, then you're looking for, what are the things that I have not very much data about at all, and it's really important to be right about. that is the thing that you want to actually go about testing. And then how you go about the process of testing that is actually fairly straightforward. The process of testing that is simply saying, okay, well, I want to know this. How do I get the data back? You could do a customer interview. You could do rapid prototyping, which I'm a big fan of. So this could be like if you're doing an online business, you weren't clear about exactly what that is, but let's say it's e-commerce. You could put together a mock-up of a storefront, put that in front of customers and see if you can get them to finding a product that they find interesting. Does that process actually work? If you're doing e-commerce and you're not having your own store, you can do a rapid prototype of an Amazon search result for what you think people are searching for in order to find your product. You put yours as one of them. You literally take a screenshot of Amazon and replace one of the items with your fake item, and you get them to click on, and you see if they find yours and click on yours. Do they do that? And if they do, you have a fake product page. That's the next screen, right? It's a fake product page for yours. Do they find that interesting? Do they then click the add to cart button? Do they do that? You can put that in front of somebody and actually watch them go through that process and see do they get to the end of that? Did they find the product compelling and interesting enough to do that? But more than that, everything that they say while they're doing it right in front of you, like on a tablet or something, is going to be very telling. They're gonna by narrating tell you if they found it clear what the title was, if the photo made sense to them. They're going to say whether or not the little summary description, a little bulleted description at the top was interesting to them, etc. They're going to tell you what's important. They might say something about like how important the reviews are part. So now you have to think about, okay, well, I need a review strategy because this is a new product and we're not going to have reviews on Amazon from day one. Stuff like that. And it's going to tell you all of those things that you can use to get back. So there's lots of different ways to go about testing. Again, that Testing Business Ideas book that I mentioned before by David Bland and Alex Osterwalder, part of the Strategizer series, that has, I think, 45 different tests that you can run. There's lots of them in there. I'm actually giving a talk this evening on rapid prototyping. It's a big subject that I really, really love. I actually ran a whole cohort program on it last week, and I am thinking about launching a 7-day e-course on it sometime in the next couple of months. So if that interests you, let me know down in the comments, and I'll make sure that you get notified if that happens. I'll know sometime in the next couple of weeks whether that's going to be a thing. So that's it. Find out what your riskiest assumption is. What's the one that it's most important to be right about and that you have the least data about? Find a way to go about testing that, through rapid prototyping, through customer interviews, through an MVP. There's lots of different ways to test it. But find the simplest, shortest, quickest path to testing that. Put that test back, get data, learn from it, revise your priors. What's the next riskiest assumption? Now go do that one. And just you keep going through that loop over and over and over again. And that's it. So, and that's it for our questions today. I'm going to go ahead and call it here. I will be right back here next Thursday, which is April 27th, 10 a.m. Pacific, to answer your questions. Again, hit that link up in the description if you have a question for me, or just comment on any of my social stuff. You can @ me anywhere and get access to those questions or answers, I guess, just from there. So thank you. Have a fantastic rest of your Thursday. Have a great weekend, and I will see you guys next week. Until then, peace out.